Lloyd and I are going to talk about video games. Are you ready, Lloyd?
Just about. I just need a few more seconds.
That's fine because I just realized I didn't have the recording software open. So I got to hit me guest samples. Okay. Move that over here. All right.
Check, check, check. Okay, everything seems fine here. There was one other comment that wanted to drop in, but I can't find it right now.
Oh, okay.
We can do without. But there was a really good comment that I wanted to add in, but I can't find it right now. Oh well, okay, never mind. We'll skip it. I'll do better at noting things that I want to add to the show
Oh,
notes
man.
through the week.
I can't tell you how many times that I see a thing and I'm like, ooh, that would be a good thing to talk about
Hmm.
on a show, whichever show it happens to be. And then I forget about it, and then I do a show, and then I look at it, and I'm like, "Oh, damn it! I was gonna talk about that, and I just totally blanked on it." And that happens a lot,
Hmm.
um, guys. When you get old, your brain starts to go. All right, here we go. Hey, everybody, welcome back to Stadiacast. I'm Bill. That's Lloyd. Hey, Lloyd.
How's it going, Bill?
I'm pretty excited to talk about video games this morning. Wow, that was weird. What the hell?
Yeah, I
That's a
expected it.
different intro.
I expected a different question from you, and I'm like, I don't know what to say now because you always like, so how's it going, Lloyd? How you doing? And it's just like, hi, Lloyd, and I'm like, hi, Bill.
Man, it just goes to show you kind of get into like a pattern, and as soon as things deviate from that pattern, everything just falls apart. All right. I'm going to
Definitely.
try and get us back on the rails. Before we get started with today's episode of Stadiacast, your source for all things Stadia. Um, Here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a look at the subscribe button, the join button, the super chat button, all of those buttons down there, not the dislike button, unless you really don't like it. Um, Click on those buttons if you're watching this on our YouTube channel. They really do help the algorithm. If you're watching this after the fact, if you're not watching it live with us, leave comments down below. That also helps as well. We're here to talk about video games first and foremost, and mostly we're here to talk about games on pretty much our favorite platform, and that's Stadia. Lloyd, what have you been playing this week?
It's been a big open world kind of week on Stadia. Before Far Cry 6 came out, we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Mhm.
I played a lot of Mafia 3. I adore the world of Mafia. I love the Mafia games. I fell in love with the first one. Played a bunch of the second one. I don't think I completed it, and I've always wanted to jump into Mafia 3 and just didn't have a chance. But through Stadia Pro, I definitely had a chance and I got in. The game is just it's amazing. It's unfortunate that it's plagued with performance issues on Stadia, to the point where if you play for more than an hour or a bit, you have this like amazing auto rewind function, because it seems like every second of the video going forward, it rewinds about a second and then fast forwards to where you just were. It's like this weird graphical bug where it's pulling things in and out of memory, I guess.
Oh, okay. Well, that sounds
So
awful.
similar to there was another game that had that, that had a bunch of like kind of the stuttering, but this is worse than stuttering. It's like backward stuttering. It's what was that thing that Google's working on where they're going to figure out what button you're going to press before you press the button? It was
Um,
kind of like that.
oh God,
Negative
reverse
latency.
latency, negative
Negative
latency. That's
latency,
right.
yeah. It's kinda like that, but it's negative gameplay, and the simple fix for that is to pick up a collectible in the game so it saves, exit out of the game, restart the game, and then everything goes back to normal. I think it was or no, it was, Watch Dogs Legion had an issue like that for me as well, where after a bit of game time, the game would just start stuttering. But this is like really weird. Like you'll step forward and then you'll see like a split second of what you just saw, and then it catches up. It's almost
Wow.
like when you have problems streaming a video and it keeps going back at a lower resolution or something.
Ugh.
Obviously, that's not what's happening, but it's very similar to that. Very jarring and nausea inducing. But besides that, Mafia is just it's really good. It's kind of like an old school open world game where you have sections of a city. You do all the quests in that section of the city to take over that section of the city. Then it gives you something. In this game, you have kind of like these underbosses that all are trying to curry your favor. So they want you to give sections to them, and then it unlocks different perks. Like you might be able to get free ammo, or you might be able to have a car that you can call from the quick select meal that will drive and offer to sell you weapons, or you might have a guy that can get the cops off your tail. So it's really interesting the way they do that, where you're kind of playing the different underbosses against each other that you they weren't your underbosses until you took over the racket and said, hey, do you want to be with me, or are you going to die? And they want to be with you. um the game is just fantastic. I love the era. It's like 1968, I think, is when the game is taking place. I love all the rock of that era, and a lot of the kind of like early sort of pop songs, and
Mhm.
it's so amazing. I don't know if the sound people did it on purpose, but most of the songs that aren't like rock, like your Clearwater type songs, like the very iconic stuff from like the Vietnam War movies and things like that, all those iconic songs are in there. But it seems like all the pop songs, they're the versions that have been redone, and the redone versions are way more popular than the originals, to the point where I didn't know that some of those originals even existed. So just listening to the soundtrack in the car has been amazing. There is one big problem with Mafia, and we're not talking about performance issues. Those will be fixed. Those will be patched.
Yeah.
Not a big deal for me there. There's no fast travel in the game at
Oh,
all.
so
There's
it's
no
an
way
open world game, and if you want to go from one end to the other, you're walking or driving.
you're driving, and it's worse. Where if you die, you respawn back at your safe house, and it's a quick respawn, so dying isn't such a huge pain because you're quickly back up in the game again. Except if you had a lengthy drive to get from where you had to go to the base that you're trying to take over.
Right.
So you basically get out, take a car, drive over, deal with traffic, get out, start shooting them, die, respawn back at your safe house, make your trek across. It's a little bit annoying in that regards. Fast travel's good for like late game cleanup and stuff like that. It doesn't look like there's any achievements for any of the collectibles or anything, so maybe they didn't put it in because they assumed people would be dealing with one sector at a time and not really going from one to the other,
Yeah.
and trying to keep it more. There was no a subway. There was no quick way to get around. Why would it give you fast travel? Well, I mean, because it's good for the gamers to put that stuff in, so they're not wasting time driving around. But then it allowed me to listen to the amazing soundtrack. So yeah, pluses and minuses, bonuses and not. Really loving Mafia 3, and it's a shame that I have to shelve it for a little bit because a game that I've been hyped up forever is out now, and I think that's going to be taking my gameplay time on Stadia. And then of course there's also Metroid Dread on Nintendo Switch, which is taking an equal amount of time. Releasing two big games like that on the same day should be illegal.
It
There should be
should
like
be. It
there,
should
there,
be. And they're
there should be a
both really
pact.
good.
There should be a pact between all major platform holders that major AAA releases can't all come out on the same day across different platforms, but that'll never happen. But yeah, Mafia 3, fantastic game. I'm really glad that I'm playing it, and I can't wait to get back into it. But I'm going to have to do some running around in Far Cry before that happens.
Yeah, as far as Stadia, the only game that I've been playing this week on Stadia has been Far Cry 6, and so that's the one where we I think that that's probably going to be a majority of the show today. There's a lot of stuff to talk about there.
Mhm.
I'm still very very early on. My experience at the very beginning was not great, and it's because I turned it on and I was using my Chromecast with Google TV in
Mhm.
order to play it, and that thing has the 4K. It has the correct, what's the word I'm looking for?
Surround sound.
It has surround sound. It has the HDR. It's got
Oh,
all
HDR.
the bells and whistles on that, which is
Mhm.
why I use it for Stadia. And when I guess there's a bug, and big thanks to our community members in our Discord for pointing this out to me. there's currently a bug with Stadia where if a game supports 5.1 surround sound, for some reason it just shuts off. And I remembered you saying something about this last week, but I hadn't experienced it. So like it was
Mhm.
at the back of my mind essentially.
Yeah.
But I couldn't hear anything. Like I could hear
Mhm.
the gunfire, I could hear the music, but
Yeah.
all of the dialogue was like I don't even know how
Not
to say it. It
existent.
was so muted, and I was like, "What in the
Mhm.
hell is going on?" And I'd go into the settings of the game, and I couldn't figure anything out, and I was so confused. And so I watched the entire opening cutscene, and then the second big cutscene where he shows up on the boat that we all saw that on their YouTube channel.
Right.
Um, I watched that whole thing, and then I finally am on the beach, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna close the game and reopen it, and that didn't do anything, and I'm gonna. So then I asked people in Discord, what's going on here, and people were like, oh, well, turn off surround sound, and that fixes it. So I turned off surround sound, which didn't fix it, but then I shut it off and turned it back on after turning off the surround sound
Yeah.
and just putting it on stereo. I
Yeah.
was really struggling not to say Stadia. And and lo and behold, that fixed it, which is it's great. I'm happy that there's an easy fix. Irritated that that is a bug. I'm glad it's a
Yeah.
known bug and that Google is working on that. But so that was my first impression of the game.
Yeah.
Then I started playing it, and this is my first Far Cry game. I've never played a Far Cry game before. And if you're sitting here watching this with us live, by the way, Lloyd and I are going to do a live stream of some multiplayer of Far Cry in a little bit after the show. So stick around for that. This is my first Far Cry game, and I have to say, really, really excited to play more of this game. It is very, very fun. I'm super early on, but I'm definitely having fun with this game.
Mhm.
So, Lloyd, as somebody who's played Far Cry and Far Cry 2 and Far Cry 3 and all the ones all the way through, I know that you're a huge fan of the series. How does
Mhm.
Far Cry hold up? How, Far Cry 6 hold up for you so far, even though we've only really had a couple of days with it?
Sure. Well, I'll get to your question in a minute. I just want to talk a little bit about the audio issues because I had the exact same issue with Mafia 3. We talked about it last week, and it was really, really weird. You would basically have to turn your head in game so your ear is pointing towards where the audio is coming from, and then you would hear it. But as soon as you moved off axis like a pixel, it disappeared. So I've had to shut off surround sound on my Chromecast with Google TV. I've had to turn HDR off on my monitor, not from Stadia, but from my Shield TV because HDR is blown up for some reason on that. I don't know what's happening with tech issues right now for additional things, but if you put it down just to 30 or a regular video, no HDR, and you turn off surround sound, everything's working. Hopefully they'll have all those patches done. It would be nice to get back to HDR and stuff like that. But back to Far Cry 6, I'm a huge fan of the franchise. We've talked about it a lot on the show, and in the Discord and stuff like that. I've played everyone since Far Cry 3. I played a little of Far Cry 2 back in the day. Didn't I think it was a rental or something. Didn't play much of it, but I really got brought into the fold with Far Cry 3, and I absolutely love that game. I'm a big open world game fan. Far Cry 6, maybe one of my favorite ones, and not for the reasons that everyone would think, like it's the best gameplay, the best gunplay, the best story. I think why it's my favorite one is nothing is really locked to you at the start. Like when you start the game, you pretty much immediately get a pet that you can
Oh my
take out
God,
on
Guapo. I
adventures.
love him.
Guapo is amazing. But in previous Far Cries, you could have like a bear or a bobcat or a badger, honey badger. But you would have to do a bunch of missions to get there, and you might not even get it till near the end of the game. They did this one right, which is like, hey, you want a pet? Here's your pet. Go kill some guys. Fantastic in that way. Fast travel's open right away. All of your kind of weapon slots are open right away, but you don't have weapons for them yet. So
Mhm.
you do a couple missions, and boom, okay, I have a machine gun. Okay, now I have a sniper. Um, they didn't really lock things. They kind of just said, here's going to be your whole repertoire, and you can kind of jump into it and do with it what you want right away, which is really great. Story wise, Giancarlo Esposito is one of my favorite actors that isn't a huge star. You'd expect him to be in like all these leading roles in movies and things like that because he plays such a good jerk. Like he plays a really good evil guy, a really good
Hmm.
jerk. And just to have his performance come across in that intro thing where he walks down the cargo hold in the boat. They showed it on Twitter. They showed it on YouTube. I won't spoil too much of it, just in case people are really, really, really worried about spoilers. But just his acting and just the passion that he brings to his role just kind of sets the tone for the rest of the game. Like, yeah, it's really good, and like little Easter eggs at the start when you pick your name and you get the achievement that pops up. If you're someone like me that likes watching Apple TV Plus shows and maybe one about soccer,
Soccer is
there's
life.
yeah, exactly right. There's
Or football.
yeah, football is life. I'm Danny Rojas,
Hmm.
and that's what pops up as an achievement. And so immediately, like one of the first things that pops up on the screen, I'm giggling because it's like, yep, this is exactly what I want to play. Yeah, I love it. The gunplay is good. That is an important part of an open world game, being able to act like accurately aim your weapons and use them. Have a bunch of different options if you want to maybe go in stealthy, or if you want to go in with throwing molotovs or whatever. um, but in going through the menus, there's also a ridiculous crafting system. So you're picking up
Hmm.
metal and plastic and glass and things like that, similar to like if you played like a Fallout game where you're picking up all this junk and then breaking it into its core components to upgrade. But once you progress from the tutorial island, that crafting system opens up to everything. You can craft, like, there's hundreds of weapons in the game. Hundreds of weapons each have their own upgrade slots and their own different modules that you can unlock for each weapon. So you can have a weapon that has all the ammo unlocked, and you can quickly switch between all those things, which is really great. But when you get to the kind of the main part of the story, you have those types of upgrades for every part of your vehicle as well, every part of your
Mm.
Supremo as well. Like, there is so much upgrading in this game where I could have the exact same loadout as you, Bill, but our weapons perform and look completely different just because I chose I want to have fire bullets and you chose poison bullets or regular bullets. I have a suppressor and a red dot sight. You have just an extended mag and just a regular quick sight. Same weapons, completely different gameplay based around it, which means that yes, you are going to be going through every single place that you stop and looking for the little white circles to pick up all the core components to then upgrade your system. Some people might not like it. They might just want to pick up a weapon and use it. You can do that. The weapons at stock are really, really decent. But the fact that you can then get into the crafting system and take my machine gun or my LMG, like the LMG that I'm using now has like it has like thermite rounds almost, like it sets things on fire. I can destroy tanks with it, and I'm like, okay, that wasn't like that when I first got it, so this is pretty awesome now. Yeah, really big fan of the systems in this game and the story. Love the story so far and the world. But I'm very early in. I didn't want to play too far ahead, so I didn't have all this crazy stuff unlocked for when we do our multiplayer session later, Bill.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch that cargo hold scene of the boat because it was completely ruined for me by not being able to hear the actors say anything. That
Mm,
was really, really disappointing. So I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch that. I did watch it forever ago, and of course, Giancarlo Esposito is one of the greatest actors ever. He's just so good in everything that he's in. So I'm a
yeah.
1000% with you on that. Um, I really like the mobility that you have in the game as well. Like there's zip lines throughout the island that I'm on right now, and you have like a parachute, so you can zip line for a while and then just drop off the zip line, pull the ripcord
Yep.
on your parachute, kind of soar around to land in the place that you're going to. Hopping on a horse.
Yeah.
Oh my God, the
Yeah.
locomotion of sitting on a horse. I live out in the country. I have rode plenty of horses when I was a kid, and this was really, really good. Like the way that the horse moves in front of you is just really good. The way that your view kind of bobs as you're riding, it's really, really impressive.
Do you use your right stick while you're on a horse to look around?
Um, I don't even know if I did. I
Oh,
was looking at the controls, and I did really love how you can hit B and like turn the horse real quick in order to
mhm.
change direction. I thought that was cool. I don't know if I used my right
It's
stick to look around. I'm gonna have to try that. I'm super super early. Why? What happens?
Well, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, where I was talking about that motorcycle game that I saw that looked photo real just because of the camera, where the
Oh
camera
yeah, I
placement is
saw
you're
that.
going around. When you're riding a horse and galloping, if you look around with your right stick, you can see your guy get really low to the front of the horse and lean to a side. So
Whoa!
if you're looking to the left, you kind of like get down, hunker down, and go to the right. So the horse's head is kind of not centered in the screen anymore; it's to the side, and you see the side of it because you're kind of around the side of the horse, and it does it the same way. And I'm like little tip, just little bits like that just go so far to making things look more realistic when you're playing games like this. And I was riding a horse around in circles just to play with the camera, and it's some of the best horse play in a video game.
Is it as good as
Be able
Barbie Horse Simulator?
I never played that game. I wanted the 1,000 gamer score, but I never did find a copy to pick up to cheese that away. I've never played Barbie Horse Adventures or whatever it was. But it's amazing that they added that into this game, because it's not a game about horses. It's not like you're playing Red Dead, where that was the main way of moving around from city to city. It's just here you can drive this ATV, you can drive this motorcycle, you can drive this chopper, you can fly this plane, you can do all this other stuff. But we put really good horse controls because why
Mhm.
not? We're Ubisoft, and this is Far Cry.
Well, there's an advantage to riding a horse is that when you go through checkpoints, you don't have to worry about getting your tires popped. I was on an
Yeah.
ATV and I was riding through and I hit the checkpoint and my tires popped and I jumped off the four-wheeler and it kept going down the road, sparks flying everywhere, and then it smashed into a tree and I was just like, "Hmm, that was really cool."
Yeah.
Another thing that I really like is your phone. Like you can, as you go up to like a location, you can pull out your phone and kind of bring it full screen so that like that's all you're looking at, and you can see all of the enemies that are in an area, and you can zoom in on them, and you can kind of do like recon work.
Mhm.
Like you could say, okay, that's like the commander of this particular area. This is where I want to go. This is the spot I can put down like a little waypoint. This is where I want to head to in order to try and infiltrate this base. All of
Mhm.
that stuff is really, really cool. And I'm just having a blast with this. And I'm super early. I can already tell that this is one of those games that you can easily throw 100 hours into it.
Right.
And I can already tell the chance of me finishing this game, of getting to the end of the story, is infinitesimally small. Like, there's no way that my attention span is going to allow me to focus on this game for long enough. So,
Right.
everything that Lloyd is saying about this game is true. Everything that I'm saying about this game, it's really, really fun. But if you don't have an attention span for a multi-hundred-hour game, keep that in mind when you go to buy this, because it is it like from what I understand, it's a massive game with stupid amounts of content, and you can play this kind of like I did with Skyrim, where I never followed the main story, and my story through Skyrim was, oh, first I found this quest, then I found that quest. I went
Right.
through and did all of these things. It's my first Far Cry game, so maybe I'm way off base on this, but it feels like the kind of game where I'm never going to finish.
Well, it's one of those games where, unlike Assassin's Creed Valhalla, where if you want to beat the main campaign, you're still looking at 60 plus hours. Trying to beat the campaign super quick is really hard in that game because you have to do a lot of leveling up. You have to unlock a bunch of your skill tree, that all the constellations and things, to be powerful enough to take on some of the harder and harder areas. Far Cry 6, you can basically start the game, mainline just the main missions, and you can beat the game in 12 to 16 hours, is what reviewers are saying. So if you just mainline the game, Bill, if you just do all the main missions, you could beat the game in less than 20 hours, most likely, and complete the story. And the best thing about Far Cry, all the Far Cries that I've played, is after you beat the game, you can come back to it at a later point to clean up all of your side missions and all your collectibles and things like that, which is really great. One thing that they added to this version of the game that I haven't had a chance to experience yet is there's rooster fighting, which is Eric
Uh,
and horrible sport. I hate the fact that that exists in real life. But what they did in this game, because as Far Cry does, they don't shy away from kind of the dirty parts of the world that they're covering. They turned it into Street Fighter. So you're basically playing Street Fighter with roosters, and you're attacking each other, and it even has like the little power meters at the start, like your health meters, and it's like it's very much Street Fighter, like finish him, round one fight kind of stuff in the game. uh so much so that if you go into the Ubisoft Connect stuff, you can unlock three different roosters right away. You can unlock one that, or pairs of roosters. You can unlock one that looks like Ryu and one that looks like Ken, and they're part
really?
of the World Fighters pack, I think. There's one that looks like Sub Zero and one that looks like Scorpion, so it's called Fire and Ice. And then there's one that looks like a character, I think, from Guacamelee, the main rooster from Guacamelee. I think that's what that's based on.
Hmm.
So they're having fun with it, which is what they do. They don't say, hey, uh, this is a brutal thing, so we're going to have all that brutality in this game, because rooster fighting is a thing that happens. They say, okay, we're gonna cover it, but we're gonna put our spin on it to make it more gamey than what it was before. So yeah, pretty interesting. All parts of the game that I've experienced so far, I've loved. There hasn't been anything that's had kind of like a rough edge or sharp points that have made me kind of wince or whatever as I'm making my way through the game. So yeah, Far Cry 6, fantastic. Is someone that's played most of the main Far Cry games, except for like 1 and 2, to any sort of completion. From 3 all the way to 6, there's nothing about this game that is making me kind of go, and the fact that you're unlocking everything right at the start, like your grapple, your health, your parachutes, being able to get in vehicles, being able to upgrade, they're not really they're not putting things behind campaign progress to then make the game easier at the start. They're just saying, You're going to have this eventually. You can have it right away. Go ahead, have fun." And Far Cry has always been about creating chaos, like throwing bits of meat into a camp so a bear runs in and takes care of everybody for you, so you don't have to actually go in and go guns a blazing. It's just like it's a chaos simulator, and the new things that they've added in this game with the Supremo, which is like a special attack that you get. Being able to launch rockets from my back. I went on in the tutorial island. There's a hunt that you have to do for this like huge boar. I can't remember what his name is, Tusk something, I believe, whatever. So I was creeping up to where he was, and I'm kind of hiding in the flowers. And
I think I
my
saw
my
this on Twitter.
I had to send it because it was just so ridiculous. My little alligator friend is right beside me, and then all of a sudden these three little boars come running by, which gets my alligator really interested. My alligator takes off after him. I'm like, oh crap, no, get back here. And then I'm like, okay, I have a weapon that has a silencer, so I'm trying to kill these guys. And then I turn around, and this huge boar is basically right in front of me, staring at me. So I hit L1 and R1. I fire my missiles. This thing rockets like 100 feet in the air, runs and hits the ground. I think he's dead. So I run up to him. Stupid guy gets up and starts turning towards me. So then I unload a whole clip into his dumb face, and completed my first hunt without being stealthy, without using any sort of hunter wiles, I just launched my Supremo missiles at this thing and destroyed it. Um, and that's what Far Cry is. It's stupid fun. It's getting yourself into terrible situations by doing something dumb and then using like increasingly more dumb things to get yourself back out of it. There's just something so fun about these games, and the collectibles in the game is another big complaint people have. It's like there's so much stuff on the map at all times. It looks like there's only three main collectibles that you can worry yourself with if you want to get like the achievements or whatever. There's USB songs, USB keys that have songs in it that unlock a soundtrack that you can listen to. And there's a couple other things. I don't want to spoil all of it. So even the people that complained about too many collectibles, that's not in this game. There's a bunch of chests and things like that, but those aren't tracked and they kind of show up when you go into an area. You can talk to people and get them to kind of pop it on your map if you want. There's fishing, there's off-roading vehicles, there's highway vehicles, there's air vehicles, there's crazy upgrades. It's just they throw everything at you at the start, and in a lot of games that would be kind of unwieldy and almost just more off-putting than anything. But they basically did good in this game, and it's one of those games where people have like their favorite like popcorn movies, like something where you can kind of
Hmm.
disconnect your brain and just laugh for a while. This is a popcorn video game. You can just spend hours just creating random chaos and just having fun, burning down fields of tobacco and blowing things up and stealth missions and collectibles and rooster fighting and like all this other crazy stuff. Or you could just mainline the main story and finish it in 14 hours and be done with what people that have reviewed it have said is a really fun and engaging story as you make your way to the finish. So, yeah, that's a long way of me saying I really like Far Cry 6.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm just not as far into it yet, and I don't
Mhm.
have the background of like. There's still like there's things that people who I'm sure who have played Far Cry before are like, oh, this is that. I know what to do here, and I'm like, I'm still confused and learning how things work. So I've got that experience. Somebody in chat asked a little bit ago about the 30 frames per second. So for those of
Mhm.
you who are unaware, Far Cry 6 runs at 30 frames per second on Xbox One, PS4, and on Stadia. And you know,
Mhm.
if you've got a computer and your computer's old, then on that as well. And they were asking, and I it scrolled by and I don't remember where it went, but it was something along the lines of, "Does the 30 frames per second feel smooth to you?" I'm the wrong person to ask about that because I tend to be okay with 30 frames per second as long as it's a stable 30 frames per second. I would very much rather have a game locked to 30 frames per second than have something that can hit 60 frames per second, but then will drop down at random times. That's always going for me, in my opinion, it's always better to have a stable frame rate than a high frame rate. Of course,
Right.
it's better to have a stable high frame rate than it is to have a stable low frame rate. I totally agree with that. As I played this, I didn't really feel like I was noticing that it was only 30 frames per second. I did feel like as I was playing, I was like, I wonder how this would feel on mouse and keyboard because on controller, like I played all the way through Doom 26 not 2016, Doom Eternal on Stadia using the
Mhm.
controller, no problem.
Mhm.
I played a ton of the Division 2, another Ubisoft game, on Stadia with controller, no problem. This one the controller feels a little bit off. My son's been playing Far Cry 6 with mouse and keyboard. He hasn't had any issues. I felt like the controller was just a little bit off. Not enough to really affect anything. And I have no idea if that's because it's a 30 frames per second game or because of some other thing like the aim assist isn't quite what I prefer or it's different than what I prefer. I did
Right.
go into the settings. I didn't see anything about aim assist on there. How do you feel about the 30 frames per second? Obviously, we would like it to be higher, but did it
Yeah.
has is it affecting you at all?
For me, for games like Far Cry, big open world games, I prefer resolution to frame rate for the most part. I want to get more detail of the scene that I'm going through. So when I played through the bulk of Valhalla, it was only 30 frames a second at 4K, but it seemed like a more kind of choppy 30 frames a second. So I was a little worried when it was announced that Far Cry 6 would only have a 30 frames per second mode on Stadia. I was like, ooh, okay. That wasn't so good when Valhalla came out. It was okay, but it wasn't the best. We'll see what happens. Um, I have a hard time finding that this is even 30 frames a second for the most part. It seems very buttery smooth. So maybe it's probably locked at 30, but there must be the power there to do more than 30, because it doesn't seem there's any like extended frame delays on any frames that make things look kind of jaggy
Mhm.
or jarring. It plays really really well. My hope is that at some point this game will get a patch similar to what we're going to be talking about in a little bit about Valhalla, where you'll be able to play 1080p 60 or 4K 30. For this game, I probably would still play 4K 30 if those are the two options that I had. Of course, I would love 4K 60,
Yeah.
but that's not possible on pretty much any system for the most part. I mean, some of the newer systems, I guess, but like big beefy PCs with expensive video cards, sure you could do that. So I find the 30 frames, well, disappointing. It's not really affecting me as much as I was worried it might. Being someone, as I said, in big open world games like this, resolution to me it outclasses frame rate as long as it's locked at 30. If this was like a more I don't even want to know, or I don't even know what kind of game would have to be better for me to be higher FPS than frame rate. But for these big games, I don't worry too much about it. But hopefully, a patch comes to the people that are really turned off by 30 frames a second.
And I agree with everything you say there. The answer to the question that you were just trying to come up with is competitive shooters. A
Yeah,
competitive
yeah.
shooter, you want to have a higher frame rate. It's way more important that you see every single frame. But for I know that there's multiplayer, but it's co-op multiplayer. For
Yeah.
that kind of game, I mean, yes, 60 frames is better, but when you're playing a game for hundreds of hours, you're just going to get used to it. And
Mhm.
somebody might do that side by side comparison, as people always do, where they're like, here it is running on Xbox, here it is running on Stadia, and Xbox is 60 frames per second and Stadia is 30 frames per second. And
Yeah.
as you look at it with your eyes and you're like, oh, well, look at that. The Stadia one is not as smooth. You're right. The Stadia one is not as smooth.
Right.
But then again, I mean, you're not going to look at them side by side when you're playing. When you're playing, you're just going to look at one and you're not going to notice that. You might notice it. Maybe you've got the best eyes in the world. You're going to get used to it. And as
Yeah.
you get used to it, that's just going to melt away. And what you'll be left with is the gameplay, which is far more important than the number, which people always focus on the number. Now, I will say this: the uh, you know the other games from Ubisoft that run on Stadia, they run really really well, and
Mhm.
it would have been fantastic for this to go 60 frames per second. I am disappointed in that. I feel like we're coming up on the third year for Stadia, and it would be really nice if they did upgrade their stuff. And I know that they've said, look, we're going to upgrade things slowly over time. It's not like we're just going to say, hey, Gen 2 blades are here.
Mhm.
We're just going to, over time, we're going to replace things and make things better. Do you feel like at this point, I mean, look at the number. I hate looking at the numbers. Stadia blades, as far as just raw numbers, are fairly equivalent to the modern stuff,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
the
that's
games
the
don't run as well.
teraflops. Yeah, the teraflops on the Stadia blades are, I mean, it's similar to what you're getting out of an Xbox Series. Those numbers, you can't really compare apples to apples
Right.
in these things. Um, to me, I obviously don't know. I'm not a developer that works on games on Stadia, but I have a feeling that the blades are fully capable of doing 4K 60 in a game like Far Cry 6. Um, but when you get to optimization for a video game, that's that's what takes the longest. Like obviously putting the whole game together takes a long time,
Hmm.
but when you're doing different tasks, the kind of like final the final thing to make sure that everything is buttery smooth, that takes a lot of time. And we talked about this on the Discord a little bit, and my own personal opinion as to why this is happening, which may not be reality and it may just be me talking up my butt, but what I think it is Ubisoft is expecting millions of sales on Xbox Series. They're expecting millions of sales on PlayStation 5. So they can devote the resources to have the engineers work and fully optimize that engine for 4K 60 on those platforms. On Stadia, they're not expecting a million sales. They might be expecting 10,000, 100,000. I don't know what they're forecasting for the number of sales, but they have to do a cost benefit analysis and say, okay, if we have our engineers optimize this game, not only is it going to push us past the release date because we're already working on these other two platforms plus PC. If we get it working at 4K 30, we'll see how it performs, and then maybe we'll devote our engineers after that to get it back up. I honestly don't think that it's the blades. I do think that they're performant enough to have that type of throughput from the CPU to the GPU to RAM and all that. And back to storage. I don't think there's any weak link in
Hmm.
that chain. I just think it's, well, we're expecting this many sales. It would cost us X number of dollars to make it work at 4K 60. Let's do 4K 30, lock it in 100% 30 frames a second, never dip below that, and then we'll revisit it as we get further down the line, which they just did with Valhalla.
Yeah, and that's a perfect transition. So we may as well move on to Valhalla. And as we do, I just want to say this one last thing. Um, it's all about you know the law of diminishing returns.
Mm,
You put X number of hours in order to get it to 30 frames per second, and then to get it to 31 frames per second, it's going to take this many more hours, and then 32 frames per second, this many more hours, and that number just keeps going up. And they got to cut it off at some point, otherwise we wouldn't be playing the game. So that's the thing that you have to remember. The game is in your hands. You can play it. And would I prefer it be a higher resolution or a higher frame rate? Sure. But
yeah,
I'd rather play it than not be able to play it, especially if it's like 30 frames per second is perfectly playable. All right.
that's right.
Moving on. We've talked about it a bunch. I don't know how much time we can actually spend on it. Lloyd has played this game a lot. Assassin's Creed Valhalla just got
Mhm.
their big update. 1.3.2 launches are launched on October 5th. They ended up putting in the Discovery Tour for Viking Age is coming on October 19th. They added a Stadia graphics mode, which allows us to now be able to play the game at 60 frames per second instead of 30 frames per second. And the update size is 8 gigabytes to 24 gigabytes, depending on your platform, or 0 gigabytes if you're on Stadia, because you don't have to download anything.
Yeah.
So, what are you going to do, Lloyd? Or if you play this game again, are
Mhm.
you going to play it at 60 frames per second, or are you just going to keep it at a higher resolution for the prettiness? Because that is a pretty game.
It's a very, very pretty game. I think this would be a game that I would be swapping back and forth from graphics mode to performance mode. I think mainly because when you get in some of the crazy battles, having a few more FPS might be nice when you're kind of peering around corners and things like that. I did jump in and looked at it. It looks beautiful. Valhalla is such a beautiful game. At any point, especially when you're in kind of the winter locations. What they did with like kind of dynamic range between the snow and everything else, they did a really good job. And it performs really good at 60 frames a second, which has me very excited for maybe a future mode like this for Far Cry 6. It performs really well. I can't wait to take a tour of the Viking Age. Maybe have my kids come and join me on that, since I'm a big portion of my blood is Icelandic, so I forever I've told our kids that we're Vikings because we have Icelandic blood, and so they've been loving Icelandic stuff, and Viking stuff. There's even the Viking festival at Gimli, Manitoba, where a lot of Icelandic settlers came to North America and settled there. So they're gonna love going through that Viking Age tour and seeing all that stuff. The game performs fantastic at 60 frames a second. For me, open world games, I'm more of a 4K guy. So if I can only get 4K 30, that will be how I play. Where other games, 1080p 60 would be fine. Open world games, I want as many pixels being used on the environment as possible. So I'd probably still end up playing it in 4K 30 if that was my only option.
So let me. I hate to do this, but I want to go back to Far Cry 6.
Hmm.
If you had if you had the option for, and I'm not just talking to Lloyd, but if you had the option to play at 1080 60, like that wouldn't really take nearly as much manpower, or dev power, I guess I should say, because a lot of devs are women. I wouldn't take nearly as much dev power for them to make that happen. I mean, getting the game to run at 4K 60, that's a lot more work. Getting a game that runs at 4K 30 to run at 1080 60, I don't think that that's nearly as big an ask. And I feel like if Ubisoft had released the game with a 4K 30 option or the more performant 1080 60 option, they wouldn't get any of this backlash at all. And people would have been really, really happy with it. And then Lloyd would be picking his 4K 30, and other
Mhm.
people would be picking their 1080 60. And I
Right.
think that that would be the better option for no other reason than the fact that you can buy this game without Stadia Pro. You do not have to subscribe to play games on Stadia. You can play the game at 1080, but you're still playing at 30 frames per second. What do
Yeah.
you think about that, Lloyd?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be a fantastic option for a lot of people. For me, I would have chosen the 4K, but a lot of people want that 60 frames a second. And playing a game as beautiful as this in 1080p with modern TVs, it's still going to look pretty darn beautiful. I think that would have been a great thing. I honestly, I think they just ran out of time trying to get the game optimized for PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox One, Xbox Series, PC,
Yeah,
and
that's true.
Stadia.
Luna.
Um, Luna, all the other platforms you can play it on. They just spent so much time getting it optimized for that. They're just like, okay, we gotta cut where we can cut, and maybe this was the easiest way, because 4K is essentially four times the pixels as 1080p. It's like four 1080p screens
Hmm.
stacked in a rectangle. But to say that it would be easy for an engine to do 1080p but 60 frames a second doesn't take into account the code base. So maybe the Stadia version was based on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One code base. Maybe they have hard frame rate limiters because of what they're doing for timing and different things. So maybe the engine that they're using just isn't set up currently to do 60 frames a second on 1080p. I don't think so because I believe you can play 1080p 60 on PlayStation 4 Pro, I think. Not
Hmm.
positive on that, so I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Sorry. I'm just going by stuff that I've
If
read
he's
over the last
wrong,
couple
leave a
weeks.
comment down below.
Say, Lloyd, you're terrible. I don't understand how you could get that one data point wrong. Um, so I feel that the engines would support it, but I think it just goes back down to manpower or people power. There wasn't enough people power to get the game performing as they want, so it could be locked at 60 frames a second in every chunk of the game. Because when you start optimizing a game, you're optimizing for all situations. You want to have all the big set pieces play out. Okay, well that's easy because it's normally the same depending on what the user does as they make their way through these big set pieces.
Hmm.
But you can also attract a bunch of people into a small area. And is that still going to be 60 frames a second? So they have to do a bunch of optimizing for that
That's
type of
fair.
stuff. So I think it'll come in time. I really, really do. But yeah, sad that it isn't there at launch. It's not affecting me personally,
Me either.
but I know there's a lot of people that have said that this is terrible, and I'm never buying that version of the game. I'd hate to have a number on a box or a data sheet keep me from playing a fantastic title. But
There's a lot of people that the numbers will scare them away. Oh
that's right.
no, the number is
That's
too
right.
low. I can't possibly enjoy that.
I will only enjoy this half as much because it has half as many frames at 4K. Um, I don't ever feel that way personally. I understand there are people like that. Fine, that's a segment of the population. They can do what they want. But yeah, I wish it was 4K 60. I really really do, just so there'd be one less thing for people to argue about on Twitter.
That's right. But hey, we wouldn't have been able to talk about this for quite as long. So let's move
That's
on.
right.
Um, this one I'm cautiously optimistic for. Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Frontline. You know, back before Stadia, I had never played a Ghost Recon game, or a Tom Clancy game. I mean, I
Right.
looked at them and I said, "Oh, realistic military shooter, not my jam. I'm not really interested in that. No, thank you." And then I
Mm,
played the Division 2 and I completely got turned around. I'm a big fan of the Tom Clancy games. Um, Although they're also hit and miss for me. Because I tried, I can't remember the name of the X whatever. X
X Defiant.
Yeah, it's a terrible name. And I didn't like it. And I won't say anything else about it. I just that I tried it and I didn't like it. So maybe this is going to hit for me. Maybe it's not going to hit for me. But I do like a lot battle royale games. I know Lloyd's a huge Fortnite fan. For me, I prefer Apex Legends. I think that is a much better BR game. Mostly just because of the locomotion and because there's no building and the different powers and stuff. Lloyd and I can argue all day about whether Fortnite or Apex is a better battle royale game. But now we're going to have yet another battle royale game into the mix, and that's Ghost
Mhm.
Recon Frontline. Lloyd, do you
Yeah.
want to tell people about this?
Yeah, so if you've played or seen people play the Call of Duty battle royale, where you're
That's
picking up
Warzone, right?
War Zone, yeah, I think
Okay.
that's what it is. It's War something. I keep getting that stuff wrong. We need more words to describe things so we could have more unique names, I guess. But it's very much a game where you are going out, you're picking up your realistic weapons, you're firing realistic weapons at realistic other weapons and people and tanks and things. This seems very much in line with that. So it's not a zany battle royale like Fortnite. Like that's why I love Fortnite, because ridiculous things that could never happen in real life happen in Fortnite. I just love the world of Fortnite. I don't think I've ever played Apex, to be quite honest with you. I don't like only being forced into multiplayer teams. I like soloing most of the stuff when
That's
I'm
fair.
when I when I'm finishing quests and things like that. I like to just get in there solo and tick things off of a checklist. So this seems more like kind of like the warfare kind of game, which is cool. It looks interesting. I mean, the teaser trailer or reveal trailer didn't really say much about what the game is going to be, other than it's like 100 people in a map, and the person that wins. It looks like
Yeah.
there's a
What
lot
a
of
unique
the
concept.
it isn't it. It's I mean they got to call this something like a battle royale, maybe. 100 people enter, one piece person leaves, maybe would be great. But it seems like there's some of the more art gamey powers from the previous kind of Tom Clancy games make their way in there. There was like the someone threw a grenade that targeted people or whatever, and there was like kind of like a bubble shield kind of thing happening. Exfiltration at one point where they're all going around a point where a helicopter looks like it's ready to pick people up. Looks really really interesting. It's also going to be free to play, which is going to be huge for this one. I love that it's coming to Stadia, because we don't have many battle royales on Stadia. I think we have two, Super Animal Royale and PUBG. I think those are the only two true battle royale games.
Hmm.
I could be wrong. I could be wrong, but maybe not.
Let him know in
Um,
the comments, people.
but this one looks really interesting. I'll definitely take a peek at this one. I haven't tried Call of Duty, mainly because of the people that play Call of Duty. I used to play a lot of Call of Duty. I was a big wartime shooter kind of guy, and then multiplayer in Call of Duty Modern Warfare just got so toxic. I equate Call of Duty multiplayer with toxicity and stuff that I don't want to experience when I'm playing a video game to relax.
Hmm.
So I never even got into the modern warfare battle royale just because I expect that type of experience. Hopefully this one will be a little bit different. It reminds me a lot of what they were planning for the Division with the different drones and different powers
Hmm.
that you could unlock. So it's almost like a Division battle royale almost more than a Ghost Recon battle royale. But I mean, they're all kind of set in the same world, so I guess it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But yeah, this looks really interesting. I'm really excited for it, mainly just because it's going to be a free to play battle royale on Stadia. So there's going to be no cost of entry, which is a great thing.
Absolutely. So first off, a very excited because this game is cross-play across all platforms. So
Yep.
if you're playing on PC, you can play with your friends on Stadia, you can play with your friends on Xbox. There is no barrier there. I'm sorry, there are no barriers up between you and your friends, depending on which box that they chose to play on or which cloud they decided to play on. Everybody
Ex-
gets to hang out together. Go ahead, Lloyd.
Except for the portable barrier that you can throw down as part of your accessories that you can hide behind. That's the one barrier that's in this
I
game.
cannot
All the other
believe I
barriers are
stopped
gone.
my thought for that. For a joke.
Woo! A finger work this time.
There you go. That's fine. In addition to that, they have like a class system, which I always really like that kind of thing when you have like, all right, this character has these abilities, and when you put those together with this character who has these abilities, you get this really cool cooperation kind of synergy between your group that makes it for some really really cool moments that I'm very
Mhm.
very excited for.
Yeah.
Again, in Apex that kind of thing happens all the time because that's also kind of a class based system, so I like that a lot. And then there's a quote here that they said that the game offers various game modes from quick and casual to highly tactical, featuring 100 players in teams of 3. So that's a downside for Lloyd because he likes to
Yeah.
play solo. This one is really more like Apex, where you cannot play solo, as far as we know. Um, the flagship expedition mode is the ultimate test of teamwork and includes dynamic objectives strewn across the massive open world with no converging circle, where players must work together and utilize their combined skills in order to call for extraction, use different abilities, call down tactical supplies, and switch between units, adapt, and showcase exceptional teamwork while competing with others. The idea that there's no shrinking circle in a battle royale is like the craziest thing that I've ever heard of because like that's what makes a battle royale not take all day long. So
Exactly.
as I'm playing a game, if I'm on one side of the map, like Lloyd and I are playing and we're on opposite teams, and like my team is on, the west side of the map, and Lloyd's he should be on the west side because he's west of me, and I'm on the east side of the map. Like and we're the only teams left. How does that work? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, I mean that's the one thing when Fortnite first started, and I saw the circle on the map, and I'm like, "What is this?" And then the circle passes me, and I'm taking damage. I'm like, "What the hell is happening here?" I was so scared of the storm from there on out. But yeah, that's what the storm is there for, is to kind of push everybody to a central area. Because once you start, if you start with 100, there might be people all over the place. But as soon as people start getting pegged off, it becomes more and more space between people. I have no idea what they're going to do here. Maybe there's going to be instead of a concentric circle that is going to keep getting smaller, maybe there'll be big things that appear on the map that say, hey, you get a super weapon if you go here. So now everybody's
Okay.
going to be rushing the super weapon to try to get that or something
You
like
know
that.
what? In the video, and I already closed the window so I can't see it, but in the video that they showed, there was a moment where they showed an object, like they showed a thing on the map, and they showed a bunch of arrows running towards that object. So maybe that's the way that you do it. You say, all right, we're going to drop this thing here. But then, you get, if Lloyd's team is way over on the west side of the map and it drops on the east side of the map, hopefully things drop in multiple locations. Otherwise, I don't know. It's a weird idea. I'm very interested in this and I'm looking forward to it. Anything else to add about Frontline before we move on?
No, I don't think so. People were saying there was a question in the chat room that I answered. Oh yeah, when is it coming out? We don't have a release date yet because there is no release date. Ghost Recon Frontline is entering early testing on PC in Europe later this month, so later in October, and then I guess we'll find out later when it's coming to everywhere. But yeah, we don't have a release date yet.
And that's what they've been doing with their games is they've been running those tests on PC only and then releasing the game everywhere else. I'm not sure why they do that. It doesn't make
Mhm.
any sense to me, but you know what?
Smaller
They
chunk
have
of people.
information I don't.
Yeah, it's that happened a lot in on early iOS App Store things. When a new game would come out that had games as service, they would usually launch in like Australia or Canada, mainly because it's just they can focus all their servers to one area, and it's such a smaller user base. Canada's 10% the size of US, so they can say, okay, we had this many active people, so that we can forecast, okay, we're going to need this many servers or this much blah to make the game work. It's interesting that they do that on the PC though, because not only are they in a small area to kind of contain the amount of work needed to service that test, but it's on PC, so there's all these different configurations now that you have to take into account. You'd think they would do it on like a PlayStation or an Xbox or Stadia or something, so that the hardware at least isn't different from person to person as they're playing.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to the end of the show where we answer all of the super chats that came in throughout the show. First off, I'd want to say that I've been running polls throughout the show to see what people think about stuff. I asked people, have you been playing Mafia 3? 44%, that's the majority of people said, not yet, but I will. So a lot of people are looking forward to playing that, but they haven't yet, probably because they're too busy running around with Guapo. I said, have you been playing Far Cry 6? And 46% said not yet, but I will. 28% said yes, and I love it. And 5% said yes, but I'm disappointed. So there's that. And then I ran another poll, have you joined our Discord yet? And that one was 50-50. So if you haven't joined our Discord yet, head on over to nerdnest.tv/Discord. Get in
Right.
there. There's over 1,500 other people waiting to talk to you about video games. All right. I did have, speaking of Discord, Cookie McCrumble put this in our Discord. Each week we make a thread in the Stadia channel where people can drop stories that they want us to talk about or have questions or discussions in order to give us content to talk about on the show. And they said,
Mhm.
I'd like to find out how many others are experiencing awful banding issues, blocky dark colors in dark scenes on quite a few games? Mafia 3 and Control most recently, and honestly, it's almost unplayable on my Google TV, on my main TV, which is an 8K Samsung. An 8K TV? Holy cow. Even
Wow.
after trying dozens of settings on PC via Chrome, it's nowhere near as bad though. Um, I
Yeah.
look, I don't know anything about this stuff. I haven't run into that issue, but what I will say is maybe it has something to do with your TV upscaling to 8K. Is that a possibility? I'm not a tech guy.
That definitely could be part of it because you only have so much data, and then you're basically up resing it by another like four screens. You're
Yeah.
going similar to 1080p to 4K. It's not as big as a jump from that to 4K, but anyway, it could be part to do with that, but it could also be I've noticed a lot of issues lately with HDR, which is why I turned HDR off both on my physical device and my monitor, and I noticed that gameplay is less bandy, if that's a word. It is, but not in that context. But anyway, I'm going to go with it. There's fewer bands of like gradients, like harsh gradients in darkness and light when I turn HDR off. So I wonder if there's just an issue that is happening right now. I don't know if this is a Stadia issue or what it is, but with the sound issues, maybe it's maybe it's that. Maybe they're working on bug fixes to fix all this stuff up, because I have noticed it a fair bit recently, less with HDR turned off. But that was never an issue for me before. So something's up. Not quite sure what is up, but we'll have to see.
I will say, you mentioned HDR. I will say that I find HDR to be very, very hit and miss, not just on Stadia, but on all kinds of different things that are video game related. And I feel like there's so many variables when it comes to
There is.
HDR. Um, if you've got Dolby Vision, then it works really, really well.
Yeah,
If something like, I don't know if there's a Dolby Vision equivalent for video games, but I feel like HDR is like, okay, this TV has good HDR, but only on this HDMI port, and this TV has good HDMR, but not when it's HDR, but not when it's hooked up to this particular device. And
yeah,
this game works really good on HDR if you've got it hooked up to this device on this TV, but this device on another TV is not so great. There's
yeah.
just so many variables, it's really hard to
There's
tell. It might be
there's
HDR, it might be something else. I'm not sure.
Yeah, there's so many different standards for HDR. It's not just one thing. There's different bit rates for the HDR. There's different kind of like communication protocols between devices to figure out what is supported. I found with my when I got my Xbox Series, HDR on my screen right in front of me, which is an LG 4K monitor, it was like overblown. Like everything was saturated, just like crazy. The Xbox has a little tool that you go into, and it has you go through a bunch of steps, and it tunes the HDR that your monitor supports for the device. And then every game that supports HDR uses that profile to properly give you the video. It would be nice if and other platforms had something like that, so that there's an HDR profile that is loaded over top. Bill and I do a lot of video stuff. We load things called LUTs
Mhm.
to take the video and add different colorization or different things to the video signal. That's kind of what those profiles kind of work like, but they're like an HDR LUT, which takes what your monitor can support, what looks good to you, and then adjusts that for it. It would be, oh, I just got LUTted. I saw that on the on the video. We have no color in the background. That's really cool. My face, I'm very embarrassed now, Bill, talking to you as looking at the video right now. But yeah, like it would be nice if there was like a little tuning mode which would then apply a LUT like thing to your HDR so that it would work across games. Because yeah, like you said, Bill, it's very hit and miss across platforms, but also across games. Some games look really good in HDR. Other ones are way too like overexposed looking. Like when if you're taking like photos and you overexpose and everything is just like blown out, or you lose a lot of the details. I've seen that happen a lot. So my solution lately, just turn off HDR, which is a
Yeah.
terrible solution, but it allows me to get past the problems.
It's like when Apple had I think was it the iPhone 4, and they had those antenna bands, and they're like, "You're holding it wrong."
Yeah, yeah.
Not the right That's not the right call, Apple.
Yeah,
And, turning off HDR is not the right call. And I'm not blaming Lloyd. He's giving you a solution, a temporary solution, unfortunately.
yeah.
Um, but the right solution would be, we need a standard. We need one standard for HDR, and that would make everything probably a lot better if that's really what's happening here. All right. Throughout the show, we had people throw in either became members. Let me hit viewer activity real quick. So we did have Chad Plante uh, became a member. We had somebody else, Chris Scott and Foso and Elsa. They remembered. They did that over again. That doesn't show up in this little activity feed, but oh, it is showing up. Well, I don't know what the heck's happening. But big thanks to everybody who became members either today or on other days. Keith Jackson sent in a $5 super chat. They said, "Is there a The Sims kind of game coming out for Stadia?" I don't know. That's not a game style that I would even remotely be interested in. I remember playing the first The Sims, and I thought, "Hey, look, I can lock this person in a room," and I was a psychopath for a little bit. Um, but
Yeah,
other
his
than that,
bladder
it didn't
exploded.
hold my attention for any length of time. However, ridiculously popular series, so it does make sense. Any that you know of, Lloyd?
Nothing that I can think of that is coming to Stadia. That's definitely one genre that doesn't have any sort of game on Stadia that I can think of. Any sort of simulation game like that. You can simulate being a farmer if you want. You can simulate running a workshop factory if you want. You can simulate being a medieval uh, medieval shop owner, but you can't really simulate a whole entire world like The Sims, which is unfortunate. So yeah, not that I can think of.
All right. Sorry if anybody knows, let us know in chat. If you're watching this after the fact, leave a comment down below. If for no other reason than it helps the algorithm. Crywolf73 sent in a super chat. They said, "Thank you to Bill and Lloyd for creating this great community." And my response to that is, it's only a great community because you guys decided to join. So thank you.
That's right.
We appreciate it. And then a plants, which the juxtaposition of the singular next to the plural is really hurting my brain. So thank you very much for becoming a member of Plants. Thank you very much for becoming a members of Plants. We appreciate it. You are awesome.
Maybe it's Chad Plant and his family members. They just have a group account.
There you go. All right, that is going to do it for this episode of Stadiacast. Thank you all very much for hanging out with us while we talk about video games every single Sunday. If you didn't know, we're going to be playing Far Cry 6 multiplayer in about a half an hour, so make sure you stick around for that. Lloyd, tell everybody goodbye, man.
All right, everybody, take it easy. Thanks for joining us for Stadiacast. We'll talk to you next week, next Sunday here, 10 a.m. Eastern. Have a good week, everybody.